Okay, so let's dive in. We're wondering about, the president's power when it comes to slapping tariffs on goods. It's a huge deal, right, for businesses, the economy. Well, a recent federal court ruling just drew a pretty fascinating line in the sand on exactly that. And that's our deep dive today. We're digging into an article that breaks down this landmark decision from the U.S. Court of International Trade. For you, our mission is basically to cut through the legal stuff and get to the core of what this ruling actually says, why it's, considered a first-of-its-kind precedent, and what it might mean for trade policy down the road.
Yeah, what's really significant here, I think, is how this ruling addresses a very specific way presidential power has been used lately. The whole case centered on tariffs imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA for short. And this court found that the president just didn't have the authority under that particular law. Well, not to impose tariffs simply by citing trade deficits as some kind of emergency.
Right, right. And the source makes it clear this wasn't just, like, a minor rebuke. The court found these specific tariffs were actually unlawful, voided them permanently. The article even calls it throwing a wrench into the past administration's strategy. And reading it, you can totally see why it directly knocks down actions taken under that specific reading of IEPA.
Precisely. And the challenge, the legal challenge, it came from 5 small businesses. They were arguing these tariffs amounted to an unprecedented power grab. Their claim was that IEPA, it was meant for real national security emergencies.
Yeah, not just as a tool to get around Congress on trade policy because of economic worries like deficits.
Exactly. So this case essentially put that specific interpretation on trial, you could say.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting and kind of highlights that first-of-its-kind thing the article mentions. Because while presidents have used other laws before to restrict trade sometimes, the court pointed out that no court had ever actually ruled definitively on whether a president could use IEPA specifically to impose tariffs this way. It's a unique legal question.
Yeah.
Hadn't really been answered head-on until now.
And this really brings up an important point about, well, checks and balances, between the executive branch and Congress, particularly when it comes to economic policy. Actually, even a different judge, I think, down in Florida had wrestled with this before. He sort of suggested the president might have the authority under IEPA, but ultimately punted, kicked the final decision to this specialized trade court.
Which is now given its answer.
Which has now delivered its answer, yeah. A definitive one.
So, okay, let's connect this to the bigger picture then. What's the core takeaway for you here?
I think the core significance is that this ruling sets a really potent precedent, specifically limiting presidential power under IEPA. It clarifies that just declaring a trade deficit an emergency, while that doesn't automatically grant the authority to slap on tariffs unilaterally, not without Congress involved.
And that really just underscores the ongoing tension, doesn't it? That push and pull we often see no matter who's in the White House between, executive authority and Congress's constitutional role in setting economic and trade laws.
Exactly. It sort of defines a boundary. It says this particular path, using IEPA this way for tariffs, that's not available to the president.
Okay, so this isn't just looking back at legal history or a past administration. Think about this, how this precedent, this newly clarified legal boundary around IEPA, how it might seriously influence debates around trade policy.
And potential presidential actions, well, in future administrations.
Right. It gives both Congress and maybe those who want to challenge executive actions a new, very specific argument rooted right in this court decision. So maybe something for you to think about is how this specific precedent might shape the actual tools available or perceived to be available for handling future trade disputes.